It's a good question. The answer is in the terms. Democracy is a different word than meritocracy for good reasons. They are different things. A democracy is not a meritocracy. A democracy is simply a means to involve the majority in a process in which their authority becomes invested in a central power. The democratic process transfers power from the base to the center. The people become complicit in their own enslavement. In a true democracy, the vote removes all power from the electorate. In a democracy, the people have only one power, and that is the power to cast a ballot. This is why the idea of a republic came about. A republic, unlike a democracy, aims to protect the rights of both the majority and the minority through a system of laws and institutions. In a republic, elected representatives are responsible for making decisions and creating laws that reflect the interests of their constituents, but they are also constrained by a constitution or legal framework designed to prevent the abuse of power. This structure provides a safeguard against the potential tyranny of the majority, ensuring that individual liberties are preserved. While democracy emphasizes direct participation and majority rule, a republic focuses on the rule of law and the representation of diverse interests within a structured government. In essence, a republic seeks to balance the will of the people with the protections afforded by a robust legal system, aiming to achieve a fair and just society for all its citizens. A republic reduces the power of the people's democratic will. Other systems will create a Senate to function as a living constitution. The Senate is charged with ensuring the rights of some are not sacrificed to the freedom of others. But none of these processes or methodologies for electing a government can be considered a meritocracy nor a way to ensure the most worthy are chosen. Some might want to argue that the voter does not just get the government they deserve, but that this government is inherently imbued with merit, having been selected by the majority of votes. To start with, few nations have a first-past-the-post election. Representatives are voted for based on constituencies. The numbers of people in atheists will claim they are moral and able to understand moral truth. They argue that they can, through moral reason, understand rape is wrong. All moral claims are claims about duties. The moral duty not to rape is owed to a moral being. All moral duties can only be owed to a being. If we are not to rape, we owe a duty to a being. But if this being we owe moral justice to is itself immoral, how could it expect or elicit a moral? If we are not to rape, there must be a corresponding benefit. The obligation cannot be a negative. If we do not rape, we do not expect to be jailed for foregoing an opportunity to rape. But atheists cannot understand how to differentiate moral goods. This is why there is crime. Criminals are able to justify crime until it is no longer a crime in their mind. This failure to know good from evil bespeaks of a spiritual immaturity. This studied ignorance bespeaks of liberalism. Liberalism goes back to the Garden of Eden. Man was convinced he knew good and evil. This means good and evil is within him, and he has the capacity to sort it out. For God, the issue is good or evil. Biblically, we are one or the other. There is a division, but for liberals, good and evil are a matter of perspective. Liberals will tell you it is the victor that writes the history. As if the losers of a war lose the ability to write books. The adage leads one to assume that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, there being no objective right or wrong. The same phenomenon, looked at from the perspective of two different observers, could be considered good or evil. So it is that people will consider God's command to kill off all people who belong to a certain tribe, evil. They believe they have the right to judge God. This must mean their moral standard is superior to God's. But there is nothing higher than God. One cannot be critical of God. You can criticize the action but not God. If you argue that God ought not to have commanded the Israelites to kill the Jebusites, you have effectively dethroned God. God, by definition, can command and do anything he wills, or he is not God. There is another group that feels they have a right to how they feel, and that is children. Children think their wants take precedence over income or safety. If this kind of thinking is not shown to be wrong, they grow up thinking that stealing is an appropriate response to scarcity. There are two types of immaturity. There is the physical immaturity of children and the spiritual immaturity of those who think their opinion and feelings matter. There is something larger than us, and that is what some call truth and others call reality. However, only the mature get this. Only the adults in the room understand ontology and the fact that we are not created for our own ends, but that there is something higher than us to which we are all sworn to. What we ought to question is if permitting everyone to have an equal say in outcomes will lead to the best possible outcome, if there is an outcome that is set as it were, in stone. If the outcome that we are to aspire to, is not up for negotiation, if we can either fulfill our purpose, or fail, ought we to be putting up whether we will pursue this end or not, for debate and a vote? Merit, by its very nature, is not a general attribute. Even if you wish to argue that we are all equal, we are not all equally good at doing masonry. We are not equally good mechanics or mothers. But if everything is up for debate and settled by an election, what role has merit? Who ought to run a company, the person who understands the process and the purpose of the company, or the person who provides the most freedom to those who work there? An election will probably select the latter at great detriment to the company. The mere fact that a question is being settled in a democratic fashion means people will generally vote from a first-person perspective. Democracy assumes there is no objective difference between the alternatives. Democracy is choosing toppings for a pizza or where to go for a holiday. We do not vote on what surgery to perform or which chemicals we will combine to get plastics. However, what do we do when everything is made available through the market, or better, when the only things that are available are what the market can provide? If everything is given a price and that which cannot be priced cannot be marketed, then not everything is available. The market becomes a filter deciding what will be available and what will not be available. But what is the consequences of letting the market decide what has value or not? The market gives power to the lowest common denominator. The market is simple and ongoing democracy. People vote with their wallet and purse. The product that is voted for the most, that expresses the highest demand, is the product and the company that will win. This does not mean that the most popular or successful product is the product with the highest merit. The question is, what defines merit? We can assume it is not popularity. But if we do make this assumption, then we discredit both the market and democracy. If there is no merit, there is no progress. If we all remain the same and no one manifests merit, there is no progress. Progress requires specialization. Specialization requires the adoption of merit. This is an equation that cannot be disputed. Merit is being exceptional. It is being the exception in a way that makes one have merit that provides the impetus to progress. Progress requires people to differentiate themselves. The more this is done, the more progress that is possible. Without the freedom and ability to differentiate oneself from the group, there is no progress. But if all choices were put to a democratic vote, there would be no progress, because the average person is not in a position to vote on the merit of a particular choice to specialize. Specialization must be left up to the individual to decide. Indeed, the stronger the democracy, the more that is left in the hands and minds of the masses, the less likely progress will occur. This is why, regardless of how democratic the nation might be, if there is progress, the economy is highly granular and unstructured so far as economic development is concerned. Progress can come from anywhere and everywhere. The more we permit the majority to decide for the totality, the closer we get to a tyranny. Every step forward is first found in the mind of a single individual. Just as the group cannot formulate a new concept, it cannot guide the formation of progress. This is always the product of individuals. If we are to have meritocracy, we need to abandon democracy. The two paths are not compatible. However, if the group cannot be meritocratic, neither can an individual decide the merit of someone else. Merit is defined by the group's response to the contributions of an individual, not the dictatorial decisions of a boss or political leader.